Welcome to Leadership Unleashed, the show that will explore the multifaceted world of leadership through insightful interviews, thought-provoking discussions, and practical advice from leaders throughout Westchester County and beyond. I'm your host, Dr. Marsha Gordon, President and CEO of the Business Council of Westchester. Today we are honored to have with us a very special guest, Heather Mulligan, President and CEO of the Business Council of New York State. Heather, thank you for joining us on Leadership Unleashed today on the BCW Podcast Network.
Thank you, Marsha. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
And we're so proud to have Westchester Medical Center as the premier sponsor of the Leadership Unleashed podcast. Thank you to Westchester Medical Center. So, Heather, before we begin, tell us a little bit about your journey and also about the Business Council of New York State.
Okay, well, it's a long journey. I was born in the Peace Corps and raised in Syracuse, New York. Eventually, I decided to work in the legislature, which led to me going to law school, working in the district attorney's office, then started my own law firm. I was, for a time, the chief public defender of Rensselaer County, and then went to the state attorney general's office, then the state senate, then a lobbying firm, and now here I am at the Business Council.
And you are the most respected business leader in New York, and I know that for a fact because I have the privilege of serving on your board of directors. And I know that you started out. The Business Council of New York State started out as a manufacturing organization, correct? And manufacturing is still so important to New York State. And I know you've just completed a manufacturing business tour, which I know this is your second year because I remember when you came to New Rochelle to Richard Ellenbogen's factory. Can you tell us a little bit about the tour and
Sure.
And why it's so important to highlight manufacturers in New York?
Absolutely. So first, you're right. The Business Council is a result of a merger between Associated Industries, which was formed in the early 1900s, and the Empire State Chamber, which was the State Chamber of Commerce. So we operate as both the State Manufacturing Association and the State Chamber of Commerce. And we have a large percentage of our members that are manufacturers, and it's sometimes people forget that there's still a lot of stuff made in New York, from gumballs to auto parts to even chips, microchips for computers. So we decided last year that we wanted to really raise awareness because there's a lot of policy initiatives that make it very challenging for manufacturers to do business in New York. And we all had the experience of a disrupted supply chain, during the pandemic and post-pandemic. So we really wanted to drill down on what are the challenges of manufacturing in New York State and how can we make recommendations to the state legislature and the governor as to how to improve the business climate so we can strengthen our manufacturing in New York. And you asked, what is the importance other than supply chain? Manufacturing employs over 500,000 people in New York State.
With great career ladders, correct? Great career ladders for people.
Absolutely. The average salary, and this is the average, and it includes all of upstate where a lot of the manufacturing is. There is manufacturing in New York City and downstate also, but the average salary is almost $90,000 a year. So
it's incredible.
It really is a very, very high value sector to have.
So we've also heard that the Business Council of New York State has won 2 national awards. This is very exciting. It's a very big deal. Congratulations. Can you tell us about those awards and how effective leadership within the Business Council contributes to winning the national awards and driving organizational success?
Thank you for bringing that up. So earlier this year in the summer, we were recognized by the Council of State Manufacturing Associations. So this is for our activities as a manufacturing association. And it's the National Leadership Award. Really, really proud of that.
It's a big
As a
one.
matter of practice, I try and have a supply every year because I think it's good. It's all hands on deck. The staff gets involved, and it makes people think about what are some other things that we could be doing as well, and let's take time to reflect on what we are doing well. And so we won that, and then a couple weeks later, the National Association of State Chambers, which is our other role, gave us the State Chamber of the Year award. So really, like, very, very proud of this. I mean, it means that, both sides of our operation, both of our roles, we're really doing really great stuff. And certainly leadership as an organization is part of what was highlighted, but I do want to say, I mean, this was all hands on deck. It was my staff. We have from our membership vice president, who has just been hitting it out of the park the last couple of years, to our one-man communications team, to our events team. I mean, everybody has worked really hard to try and make the greatest impact possible, and I was very proud that we won both of them.
As you should be, Heather Mulligan, and your entire team, and the growth in the membership and the involvement is reflective of what everyone is seeing in terms of your organizational success. You're listening to the BCW Podcast Network. This is Leadership Unleashed, and we will be right back.
A lot goes into planning a birthday. For my daughter Cameron, it started with a stem cell transplant to cure her sickle cell disease. Yes, cure. Westchester Medical Center Health Network uses every technology, technique, and talented specialist to conquer diseases that could otherwise rob a child of childhood, helping my daughter and thousands of others at Maria Ferrari Children's Hospital. Happy birthday, Cameron.
Happy birthday.
WMC Health, advancing care here.
We are back on the BCW Podcast Network. Today we have the pleasure of speaking all about leadership with Heather Mulligan, President and CEO of the Business Council of New York State. I'm Marsha Gordon, and I'm President and CEO of the Business Council of Westchester County. So Heather, let's talk a little bit about working in Albany, working with elected officials, and as the leader of the largest business membership organization in New York, how do you handle working with elected officials in Albany on both sides of the aisle on key issues affecting the business community?
So that's I came here when I was 19. I was an intern in the state assembly, and didn't really know a lot about the operations of the state assembly before I started, but immediately just really enjoyed the talent. There's a lot of people who have negative impressions of elected officials, but I can say I've had the privilege of working for some incredible leaders. I worked for an assemblyman from Westchester, Greg Young, who is the person who actually told me basically that I could go to law school. I didn't have the confidence when I first worked for him, and he,
that's a great mentor. Yes,
he was amazing. I also, you fast forward a little later, I worked for not an elected official, but really the lead at the state or the Albany District Attorney's Office, a guy named Dan Dwyer, who passed away some years ago. And I worked as doing his trial preparation. And again, here I was, 20 years old, and this incredible, think law and order type figure really trusted me to go through the materials and help him prepare for trial. And I learned a lot. And he gave me one of the best pieces of advice anyone's ever given me, which is to embrace your ignorance. He said, don't think that you know everything.
Embrace your ignorance. Love that.
Yeah. He said, if you assume that you don't know everything, you will go and you will try and find out and you will look it up. If you make assumptions, you could be wrong. And it's like if you make an assumption in a recipe and you put salt instead of sugar because you assume the salt is sugar, everything comes out wrong. So you have to check. You have to, check your sources. it's probably, I mean, it's probably not the greatest example in the world that I just thought of off the top of my head.
It's a very
But
good example.
if you don't make assumptions and you inquire, you'll do a lot better at everything. So it was a great piece of advice, and I've tried to always follow it. And I will say this, people make a lot of assumptions about other people and their views without inquiring as to why they think the things that they do or why they have the beliefs that they do. If you don't ask, you'll never understand. So
very, very important. So given that you've had such great advice and great mentors, how would you describe your own leadership style at this point, and how has it evolved over time?
So I think I would say this. I think I'm probably a terrible manager, but it's because I really have faith in people's abilities to do their work. I try and hire people for things that they're better at than me. And that's a hard thing to do. I mean, I think if you think about the ego of a leader, you don't want anyone to outshine you. Well, I'm kind of good with people outshining me.
And
If I was in charge of like event planning, it would be pretty much a disaster. Not great with my own schedule. So I've tried, I think, to have faith in people, give them the room to do things the way that they do them. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't, then we have a conversation about, what are some things that we could do in a different way. And I always try and look at it from the point of view of not as a criticism, but what can we do to have continuous improvement? So it really is about having faith in people and not kind of forcing people into doing things the way that you want them done. Because a lot of times, if you did things the way I want them done, they wouldn't come out right.
We are. This is a fascinating conversation, and but we need to take a break now. So you are listening to Leadership Unleashed on the BCW Podcast Network, and we will be right back.
This is the coming home you dream about.
But getting here was unimaginable.
At 25 weeks, I was hemorrhaging badly, losing amniotic fluid. Fortunately, I was taken to Westchester Medical Center, where they have the most advanced care in the Hudson Valley for high-risk pregnancies and premature babies. And because we were there, now we're here.
WMC Health, advancing care here.
Welcome back to the BCW Podcast Network. This is Leadership Unleashed. Heather and I have been having a great conversation surrounding leadership and business. And Heather, I've seen that you are an inspirational and motivating leader of your team. And you've developed a great team. And as you said, you let them shine. How do you make that happen, especially in times of uncertainty that we've been through and we're going through now?
There's a lot of things that I think are really important. I think one thing is the ability to try and figure out what is someone's strength and what, we've got a person on staff who has this incredibly positive personality, but she was a little nervous about doing media. And so we kind of encouraged her a little bit. We did some media training, and turns out she loves it. I have firsthand experience with that myself. I was the person who, I would only speak in class when called upon. And then I did moot court when I was in law school, and I realized I really like talking. I like having a conversation. And so I do radio a lot now, but you have to give people the space to get comfortable. And not force people into a role that they're never going to be comfortable with. And sometimes it's trial and error. I think just understanding that not everybody is the same, and there are going to be things that some people really enjoy, and they may not necessarily know at the beginning that this is something that they're going to enjoy. But letting people test out and try different things and see what works. And it has been really nice to see. I mean, you know, Marsha, that I like to have our lobbyists get recognition in the press. And so I like people to get quoted. It shouldn't just be me. It should be other people. And it's nice, you know, their families, they can see someone, you know, that a relative's name in the paper or on TV. Those are kind of little perks that will encourage people to, you know, really be engaged, but it also gives them additional career opportunities, which I think is important. You know, I don't expect people to work here forever. A lot of people do, as it turns out. We've got one person who's been here 40 years, but I think that people should always have opportunities for growth.
You have a great team. And I think it's because you really have a culture of authenticity and also, as you just described yourself, as empathetic also as to what people's strengths are and a little bit of encouragement mixed in there. It seems like that's a great recipe for success and building teams. And I've heard you say, Heather Mulligan, that the Business Council of New York State is really about, it's not just about Heather, it's about the entire team, and it's about what everyone is accomplishing. So finally, let's talk about decision making. And, you know, we all come at times in our career when we're faced with tough choices that could impact our organization's future. How do you work with that?
So that's interesting. I am a person who will make a decision. Like I am.
Yes, you are.
I like to just make a decision and move forward. I think the most important thing about decision making is recognizing, I mean, I like this, fail fast, right? If it doesn't work, if you made the wrong decision, you got to own it and you got to change your mind and do something different. And I am forever mystified by this culture that we're in, where if you have made a decision about something, you're never allowed to change your mind. In politics, you know, the idea that a person could change their mind is just this. I mean, it might as well be a unicorn. It's kind of crazy to me. I mean, to me, that is one of the most beautiful things about being intelligent, remarkably bright creatures. My favorite book, by the way.
That became my favorite book because you told me about it.
But one of the most amazing things about it is you can learn as you go, and you should adjust based on the information that you have. So I make a decision, and if it doesn't work, I revisit, and I will, you know, I'm willing to own that it was the wrong decision. I'm willing to say something was a mistake, go back and fix it. And it's funny, back when I was running the public defender's office years ago, I think I surprised some of the young staff. They weren't younger than me, but they were clerk level positions when I said, like, if you find a mistake, if we missed something, just tell me. I'll go talk to the judge and we'll try and fix it. The worst thing that could happen is we cover it up or we pretend it didn't happen. And that's my view on mistakes, is you have an obligation to recognize a mistake, own it, and move forward from there. And that culturally, that's almost unacceptable in politics. And I think that's just absurd.
And, you know, Heather, I've seen you do this, not that you've made any mistakes that I can think about, but sometimes you say you make a mistake. And I've seen you do this not only with people who report to you, but also with members of your board. And you are also someone who listens carefully, and you gather opinions around you to help you define that strong decision-making capability you have.
I think listening to other points of view, especially those that you don't necessarily agree with, is really, really important to making good choices.
So Heather, just in our final few minutes, talk to us about your leadership going into 2025 and beyond for the Business Council of New York State.
Okay, I think you know, we're going into we're going to be coming out of a presidential election, and I think one of the most important things is to try and convey facts and information. So, I mean, there's going to be a lot of upset people, however this turns out, right? We know the country's very divided. but it's very important that we be able to operate, to do business, to continue. And I think the most important thing that people can have is confidence in what are the rules, how do we do the recount. People want to know what's going to happen. We don't know who's going to win the election, but we need to stay steady and calm. And I think that it's incumbent on business, to really be the voice of reason as we move forward. I mean, business creates the opportunities for people. Business creates, the tax revenue that keeps our government afloat, that provides all the services. And I think that it's very important that we just stay steady. We make sure that people know that it will settle down and there'll be a normal.
There will be excellent perspective and outstanding advice from a great leader who I have the good fortune to work with, Heather Mulligan, the president and CEO of the Business Council of New York State. It was a great pleasure to have you on as our guest today on Leadership Unleashed. And we want to again thank our sponsor, Westchester Medical Center, and our listeners. Have a great day.
Thank you, Marsha.
The BCW Podcast Network. Build, connect with